Quick disclaimer before we start. We finished recording this episode right before the Suns matched the Pacers offer sheet for Deandre Ayton. It doesn't really change the content of the episode, but we do talk about how this impacts Phoenix's ability to trade for Kevin Durant. And by matching the offer sheet for Ayton, the Suns can't trade Ayton until January 15th, and they can't trade him for a full year without his consent. So he basically has veto power over any trade. So this basically takes Deandre Ayton out of any possible offseason trade scenario involving Durant.
Is Donovan Mitchell on his way to the Big Apple? And can Haywood Highsmith wind up starting at power forward? We answer these questions and more on today's edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be watching or listening on YouTube, on Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I am David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. We're going to bring you the latest regarding Donovan Mitchell, as The Athletic is reporting that the Utah Jazz have engaged in trade talks with the New York Knicks and not the Miami Heat. Can we buy into this? We'll talk about that and more as we open up the mailbag and answer some of your questions regarding who might be starting at power forward for the Miami Heat this upcoming season. But we'll start off with the latest news that just broke earlier today on Thursday afternoon regarding Phoenix Deandre Ayton signing an offer sheet worth 4 years and $133 million, the largest offer sheet in restricted free agency history with the Indiana Pacers, according to his agents Bill Duffy. They're telling that to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. The Suns have 2 days to match the largest offer sheet in NBA history and to keep Ayton or to let him go to the Pacers for nothing in return. So, Wes, first and foremost, how does that impact Phoenix's pursuit of the Kevin Durant news?
Yeah, I mean, it hurts Phoenix's ability to get Kevin Durant because DeAndre Ayton was thought of as sort of the centerpiece in any sort of KD deal. Now, I think some of that's been overblown. Part of that because, number one, the hard cap that would be involved in a sign and trade that, you would end up hard capping Brooklyn. It's almost impossible for them to get under that hard cap threshold. So that's part of it. The other part of it, too, is it never really sounded like the Nets really wanted DeAndre Ayton as a centerpiece in return for KD. So this stuff might be a little overblown, but in terms of where this leads or where this leaves Brooklyn now, it does create some clarity on the situation. And I do think that overall it helps the Miami Heat in their pursuit of Kevin Durant. Now, a couple of notes on this. DeAndre Ayton, as we're talking about this, hasn't officially signed the offer sheet. All the reporting is that he is going to sign it, that he plans to sign it. He has until midnight tonight, basically, to sign it, which leaves this window open for a sign and trade to potentially happen on Phoenix's end. But again, I'll say this. Woj reporting that the Suns are not interested in pursuing a sign and trade with Indiana for Miles Turner or something like that. Again, something that a lot of people have just sort of penciled in as something that makes sense. But Phoenix is just, for whatever reason, not interested in it. And I just don't see the Nets being like basically responding to the news that he's going to sign to an offer sheet by rushing into a Kevin Durant trade that they could have made weeks ago, right? So I basically just think that this overall helps Miami. It creates more clarity in the overall situation, and I know we're going to get into all that stuff more. But I just don't see DeAndre Ayton being involved in a Kevin Durant deal right now.
We should also clarify that the Pacers are making minor roster moves in order to clear up the sufficient salary cap space so they can accommodate this offer. It seems very likely at this point, maybe 70-30, 80-20, that Ayton is likely to wind up on the Pacers roster. Yes, the Phoenix Suns can match the offer. The argument in their favor is that they don't want to lose him for anything. And as you explained, eventually they could include Ayton in a trade move down the road. They could even sign and trade him with another partner at some point. Well,
part of that too, part of that too is if he does sign this deal, regardless if he's on Indiana or if Phoenix matches it, he could veto a trade for a full calendar year to anywhere he wants to go. So that's part of it too. And he he can't get traded until I think January 15th, and for a full calendar year cannot be traded to Indiana if Phoenix matches the offer and he stays with the Suns. So some just weird, interesting parts of it too.
Yep.
But it all just sort of amounts to Deandre Ayton probably not ending up on Brooklyn.
Yeah, and this is kind of unusual. It feels like this is the first domino of many to fall. Like for Ayton to make this decision, to finally come up to this point and say, you know what, I'm willing to go to Indiana, because there weren't a lot of offers out there, at least not that have been reported. Not a lot of reported interest in acquiring Ayton, maybe because they were unwilling or not a lot of salary cap space available out there to sign a player like that.
Right.
But he also feels like it's the biggest name that would have been included in any potential Kevin Durant trade. No knock on Tyler here or anybody else, but at this point, this feels like this is a significant domino to fall, because Ayton would have been a very interesting and lucrative part of the puzzle to acquire Kevin Durant, and now all of a sudden that's no longer the case. Again, as we reported before, not reported, but talked about, it seems very likely that Bam Adebayo will not be included in any trade scenario for Kevin Durant. So that would have been the bigger name otherwise, but at this point, it seems like it's Ayton, and then from that point, I mean, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, maybe.
Right. And like we've talked about, like Toronto's odds, their NBA Finals odds have dropped, which makes you believe that maybe their chances of getting Kevin Durant have waned a little bit. We have no indication at all that Kevin Durant would be interested in playing anywhere other than Phoenix or Miami, right? And so if I think what we're talking about here is, all right, we're talking about Phoenix's best offer that does not include DeAndre Ayton versus Miami's best offer that probably does not include Bam Adebayo. Now, worth also mentioning that Woj reported that Brooklyn is basically telling the Heat to get another team involved because Miami's straight up offer isn't good enough. If Brooklyn is trying to get Miami to get a third team involved, presumably that means that Brooklyn wants Bam Adebayo. Now, I'm not saying whose Woj's sources are, but he tends to report more from the New York side than the Miami side. So to me, I'm reading in between the lines and saying, you know what, that's probably Brooklyn trying to create some leverage through the media a little bit there. So we're getting to the point where it's very possible that Brooklyn is sitting there with two offers, one from Phoenix that probably caps out at Mikal Bridges, maybe throw Cam Johnson in there and some picks, and Miami, which is probably going to be Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry's salary, and some picks. And if those are your two best offers, I think they're relatively comparable. I think Miami is slightly better, but that's just me. And I think that's those might be the deals that Brooklyn is looking at. And then the third door is just, hey, let's just hold on to Kevin Durant and not trade him at all. So that's obviously an option for them. He's got 4 years left on his contract. They don't have to trade him. So that's kind of where we're going down to at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, no clear indication one way or the other, and we're hearing conflicting reports. Like I think Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald has already said that Bam has not been included in any trade scenario, and he would hear it directly from the Heat front office, so or his sources within the Heat organization. So I think we're already starting to get some kind of clarity there about Miami's willingness to part with Bam Adebayo and any kind of deal for Kevin Durant. So that's. We're kind of stuck here, and this is a domino, but not necessarily a clear indicator one way or another. I think overall, it seems like it would probably favor Miami, right?
The DeAndre Ayton stuff?
Yes, the Ayton news. If you're looking at Miami's
absolutely
potential trade package being comparable or maybe even slightly better to what Phoenix is offering, I think we could probably assume that Kevin Durant might wind up in a Heat uniform at some point, or again, as you said, that they'd wind up keeping him. It seems like Miami's probably likely on top right now in terms of the better offer than Phoenix, and then maybe somewhere in a distant third is Toronto.
I think they're more desperate too, right? I mean, Phoenix is sitting there with the team that just won 63 games. They have Chris Paul. They have a legit superstar in Devin Booker. Looks like they might lose Ayton, but if they match this Ayton thing and keep him, you're basically running back the same team. Mikal Bridges is awesome. Cam Johnson's really good. Like, that's a really good team. I think that on paper, much better than what Miami is. Like, chances of them getting back to the finals right now if you just compared both rosters as is, Phoenix is much better equipped to get back to the finals than Miami, who clearly took a step back in losing PJ Tucker. I think the Heat are more desperate to make that move, right? And so that almost favors Miami in terms of some sort of Durant deal. I don't think they'll include Bam. That's everything I've heard too. I just don't think that they envision themselves as a championship roster. You don't get Kevin Durant to sell jerseys. The Heat aren't interested in that. You're getting Kevin Durant to win a championship. And even if it costs you Bam Adebayo, I don't know that a team with Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry is good enough to come out of the. I don't think that team is better than Milwaukee. I don't think that team is better than Boston. And I don't think the Heat's front office thinks so either. That's why they've been so reluctant to include Bam in any sort of deal. So I think they'd rather just, you know what? We missed out on Kevin Durant because we're not able to include Bam Adebayo. I know we have a mailbag question about that exact scenario later on in the show.
Well, we'll also be talking about Donovan Mitchell. And there's a couple points that you brought up there that I think are maybe worth expounding upon in the next segment. So we'll do that as well. But first, just a reminder that betonline.net remains your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. If you want to find the latest odds of Miami's chances at a championship or their chances at acquiring Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell, the betonline.net is your source. You can also get all of your sporting wagering information, live betting, esports, news, podcasts, and so much more. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check out all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, golf, you name it. You can find it on betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. We've heard from so many of you over the last couple of days, gotten a lot of just terms of support, thanking us for being able to carry you through the offseason. That means a lot to us, and submitting questions, some of which we'll answer in the next segment. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But I wanted to mention something about, you brought up at one point about PJ Tucker's loss, and I kind of disagree. You said that this makes them clearly worse than they were last year. And I'm not so sure. Maybe I'm still being foolish in my optimism here, but I still think we're going to get a better version of this team and continue to develop some of the players that we have already or that Miami has on their roster, plus get some kind of improvement from some of their veterans. And I'm looking specifically at Kyle Lowry, and we're seeing some images from him out of, I believe, Utah, where he seems significantly leaner. Mark Jones, during a summer league game, talking about that Kyle Lowry has gotten into world-class shape. As per Pat Riley's recommendation, he does look somewhat leaner than he did even during last season with Miami. And I think that's significant. Like, I know that even at his age right now, there's still the risk for injury. Doesn't matter what kind of shape you're in. Jimmy Butler is always in world-class shape. Bam Adebayo always in world-class shape, and still injury befell both of those players last season. So it doesn't necessarily it's not going to keep Kyle healthy for a prolonged playoff run. But I also think that when he's out on the floor, he's going to be a better version of the player that we saw last year, who was still really good. And I want to continue to emphasize that. Like, people are bagging on Kyle, and I think somewhat needlessly so, having dealt with the injuries that he did, even throughout the playoffs, the personal issues that impacted him for most of the regular season, he was still an impactful player. Did he have 40-point games? No. Guess what? He didn't do that at any point throughout his career, and he still helped Toronto win a championship. That's just not who Kyle is. He's going to set the table for everybody else and makes everybody better, and I still think that's his role. Having said that, if he's in better shape, I think that role becomes much easier for him, and he helps everybody else to a significant degree as well. So I don't know that they've necessarily gone clearly worse. In fact, I think they're even with a roster. And look, I love PJ. I think he's going to be a great addition to Philadelphia. Unfortunately, I think they are going to miss him to some degree. But I still think that Bam's going to take another step forward. Even today, in a piece by the Miami Herald, talking about everything that we've talked about, that he has to increase his offensive output, that he has to take more shots, that he has to look to be more aggressive, that he's looking to expand his range, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that we've talked about ad nauseum for the last few seasons, it looks like maybe now he understands that. And his teammates have been telling him that he needs to take more shots throughout the game. So if you get a better version of Bam, an older, more steady, more consistent version of Tyler Herro, who was also pretty good, and we're kind of overlooking that as well. If you get another healthier version of Kyle Lowry, you get Jimmy to some degree what he was last year, considering the fact he's going to be another year older, I still think that this is a very, very good team. And of course, Victor Oladipo re-signing with the team and continuing to grow, Max Strus continuing to grow, et cetera. Like, maybe this is a topic for a future podcast, but to me, this isn't necessarily a worse Heat team. I think this is actually a better Heat team. And I don't know that I don't think that they're going to be able to cruise to a 1 seed like they did last year, because I think you're going to have Milwaukee that's better. You're going to have Philadelphia that's better. Almost every team is going to have gotten better to some degree in the Eastern Conference, with the exception of Brooklyn, who took a step back. But I still think Miami's going to be in the thick of things for a playoff seed, for a top 4 playoff seed.
I just don't see how they replace PJ Tucker. I thought he was so important to that team, but maybe you're right.
All right. Having said that, we turn to the news out of Utah, where the Shams and Charania of The Athletic is reporting that the Jazz and Knicks have begun discussions on a potential trade to send the 3-time All-Star to New York. The Jazz are having conversations with multiple teams, including, of course, Miami, but the Knicks have emerged as the focus destination, according to Charania, over the past several days. According to sources, both sides have discussed a deal framework in the past 24 hours, according to Charania again.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have that. And you don't necessarily buy into that. I think you've mentioned something to me that you think that maybe this is just posturing for the Jazz.
I think it is posturing, but I do believe that the Knicks are the favorite. If both of those things can make sense at the same time. BetOnline, our partners over there, have Donovan Mitchell's odds to the Knicks as an even 1-to-1. So you bet $1, you win $1 back. So basically, no point in doing it. Which just speaks to how clearly the Knicks are the favorite to get Donovan Mitchell. Right. And look, I don't need Shams reporting to know that. It's so obvious. You just look at the Knicks assets, and look, nothing Shams. I'm just saying, like, you look at the Knicks assets versus what Miami has. Forget the RJ Barrett versus Tyler Herro comparison. We can discuss whether or not RJ Barrett is a better centerpiece in a deal or Tyler Herro. We can have that discussion if you want. I just don't think there's a point, because at the end of the day, the Knicks have 11 first-round picks that they could trade between 2023 and 2029, and the Heat have right now 2, right? And they can unlock maybe 3. So
we've seen some reporting on the other end of it too, where Danny Ainge and the Jazz front office value Herro more, but when it comes to assets in total, including those draft picks, Miami's woefully.
Yeah, maybe they do value Herro more, but probably not so much to the point where, we'd rather have Herro than Barrett and like 3 additional first-round picks, plus pick swaps that the Knicks can include that Miami can't really include. So, yeah, man, like if basically it comes down to this: if the Knicks want Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz are willing to trade Donovan Mitchell, then the Knicks are going to get Donovan Mitchell. And that's why I think the odds reflect what they do. I just don't see right now how the Heat get in the game. Now we have Andy Larson, who does a tremendous job reporting on the Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune, reporting that the Jazz told Miami to go get a third team involved, and that they also want Max Strus, which seems like kind of a weird hang up in a deal. Like we love Max Strus, but if it's Max Strus is not going to be the deal breaker to get Donovan Mitchell if you're already willing to include everything else it might take. So, it kind of feels like all this reporting is just a little bit of leverage from Utah to try to get a little bit more from the Knicks.
Strus played with the Celtics at one point, and when Danny Ainge was still there, so maybe there's a connection there. Maybe Ainge has always liked Strus. Again, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That doesn't seem like that's the point. It's like, we couldn't pull the trigger because this is kind of like, to mock the Lakers fans, which absolutely deserve it. But the Taylor Horton Tucker talk, it's like, that's why you couldn't get a superstar, is because you weren't including that guy. Right. I mean, Max Strus, great, we love him, etc. But yes, he's not going to be. He's not up.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, so I just think I think basically what we're looking at here, just from the reporting, and again, I say this on the show all the time. When you're reading these reports, whether it's Woj, Shams, whatever quote unquote sourced link that you're reading, ask yourself, why is this being reported now? Whose interest does this serve? And right now it's clear that all of this reporting serves the Utah Jazz, just trying to wring the most out of any potential Knicks offer, because the Knicks are not trading all 11 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell. We know that. But we know that Danny Ainge is trying to get them, as many of them as possible. And that's what it kind of looks like is happening here.
And I've mentioned this to you, and I think I mentioned in yesterday's podcast as well, I find myself just being surprised by this. I thought when we started hearing the Knicks as an interested suitor for Donovan Mitchell, it was before the acquisition of Jalen Brunson, which always seemed like a done deal. But to acquire Brunson, who's somewhat undersized and a gamer and everything else, a solid defender, and then to get Mitchell, who's also not a great defender and somewhat undersized, like, I don't know that that's necessarily the pairing in your front and your backcourt that you're looking for. So I find it to be a head scratcher. I also find that he's not going to raise the ceiling of that team. If they wind up including RJ Barrett, then certainly I think that's not more than a play-in tournament team. I think ESPN's Tim Legler said the same thing. The guy who's usually pretty fair in his analysis, he said, well, I mean, even acquiring Mitchell doesn't necessarily make them a shoo-in to reach the playoffs. I find myself like confused at why they'd want to.
He's a legit star. He's a legit star in a way that
Local
Jalen
champ.
Brunson isn't.
I get it.
If Donovan Mitchell's in New York, he will be one of the highest selling jerseys in the NBA. He's going to be one of the biggest superstars in the NBA. That's just the way it is. When the Knicks have a player, they haven't had a player that good since Carmelo Anthony. And we saw how the world reacted to Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo is going to be in the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. And a lot of what he did was in Madison Square Garden. So, look, I'm with you. I don't think that team's winning a finals ever. But I also, if you kind of think about it on the other way, if you're the Knicks and you have a realistic path to getting the best player you've ever had since Carmelo Anthony, are you going to let the fact that you signed Jalen Brunson keep you from getting Donovan Mitchell? Like, that also doesn't make sense. Look, if the best case scenario for them is sort of Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, perennial playoff era Portland Trailblazers, that is so much better than what the Knicks have been over the past 30 years,
fair.
right? So,
That's
yeah, they're
fair.
probably not winning a finals, but at least they'll be kind of good, which is way more than the Knicks can say, again, since the last 3 decades. So, yeah. I just, you got to ask yourself what the goal is. All of this, to me, also kind of going back to the Kevin Durant stuff, it seems crazy, but I think it's true. Miami's path to Kevin Durant is so much easier than their path to get Donovan Mitchell. And Kevin Durant right now is
That wasn't always
worlds
the case.
better than Donovan Mitchell. It's not close in terms of just what the player is. Now you could say, hey, this guy's he's younger, upside, whatever. That's a different discussion. It's not as if the Heat have their choice between Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell, because I kind of don't think they do. I just don't see the realistic path to getting Donovan Mitchell. If the Knicks want him, they're going to get him, as long as the Utah Jazz are willing to trade him. And it sounds like they are. And so the path to getting Kevin Durant is much cleaner than getting Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah. If we did this exercise with Kevin Durant in the first segment, like Miami's offer potentially is better than what Phoenix can offer, which puts them in the catbird seat. Conversely, for Donovan Mitchell, the Knicks have a better offer on the table. So it just seems like, like you said, the path to Kevin Durant is much more likely one. Again, I did not see that happen. I did not see that to be the case. Like, at first, when this offseason all began, it was the talk about Kyrie Irving wanting out of there. And then, of course, the other shoe drops. And then, Kevin Durant wants out as well. And then they trade Rudy Gobert. And then you hear the talk about, well, it looks like we're going to keep Donovan. And now they've offered him trade talks too. So it's just a crazy wild summer. And it's not even completely over. This is why, this is why I said, like, you never know what the future entails, because Miami always just wants to be able to be in the hunt for this kind of a player. And so many people have I just rallied against that kind of idea, the philosophy from the front office. But that's just why you always go all in on winning immediately. Now, screw 5 years from now. Who knows what happens? Who knows what player might fall onto your lap? I don't think anybody would have predicted a year ago that Kevin Durant could possibly be in a Heat uniform. And yet here we are with better than 50-50 odds of landing him. So I think that speaks volumes about Miami's confidence and their ability to be able to get their superstar. But we do have some questions from some of you, so we'll be opening up a pseudo mailbag in the next segment. So make sure to stay here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to continue to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. We're available on all platforms. Make sure you get the best daily content, providing all the information and coverage you need throughout this crazy and awesome off season. But we get to this first question. This is a pseudo short mailbag. We're not making a full episode here, but just a couple questions that we want to answer right away. And this one is an important one, certainly relevant to what we're talking about now. It comes from Malcolm Haynes. He asked, what's the Heat's plan if they strike out on both Donovan Mitchell and Kevin Durant? Could they go for Kyrie Irving? So just as I mentioned before, Irving a possibility for the Heat earlier in the offseason. At least that's what the reports were. But now, if they strike out on Mitchell and Kevin Durant, could they go for Kyrie? My feeling is no. I think that ship has sailed to some degree. I think his link to Los Angeles seems a lot more clear. And also from what you've heard, I think they have zero interest in getting a player like Irving on the roster.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. But that's what I've heard now. It doesn't mean that the Heat's front office's opinion can't change, right? If Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, let's call it, and Donovan Mitchell is in a Knick, and you're the Heat just sort of sitting here with no superstar and no real chance to go get one, right? And Kyrie Irving is available. Look, the Nets are not enthused at all about taking back Russell Westbrook. The Lakers don't seem willing to budge off of the 2027 and 2029 picks that Brooklyn wants. And so maybe there isn't a path for Kyrie Irving to end up on the Lakers. I think a lot of people are just assuming eventually the Lakers will just give in. And maybe that's
Right.
true. But if the
Right.
Heat come to the table with Kyle Lowry, and Barry Jackson reporting that the Heat have already made it known to Lowry that they won't trade him for Kyrie
Right.
Irving. But again, that was before. And when Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell were at least seen as viable options. If they are no longer viable options, they could change their mind. There's no rule against that. There is no rule against that. And so I do wonder if they would budge off that stance. And there's something to be said. You and I have talked about this. If it's between giving everything up for Kevin Durant and everything up for Donovan Mitchell, or just Kyle Lowry and maybe a first-round pick somewhere down the line for Kyrie Irving, that's at least, in my mind, worth a conversation. Now, again, what I've heard is that they are not interested in bringing Kyrie Irving into that locker room. It's something that you and I have discussed, and that's Miami's that's their prerogative. That's their stance. And by the way, that's a stance of, it appears, a lot of NBA franchises that are not named the Lakers. They just there's not a whole lot of league-wide interest in bringing in the personality of Kyrie Irving, but desperate times call for desperate measures. The Heat are not desperate yet, but they could be.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Like, I'm not sure the insertion of Irving brings its fair share of negatives. You know, there's the vaccination issue, which is not as much of a problem as it was obviously last season. There's the fact that he could be AWOL at any given point in time, and you don't know exactly why. His commitment to the basketball side of things somewhat questionable. You take it because for whatever games that he's available, he's going to be a star level offensive player, and of that there is no doubt. And he makes this Heat team probably a little bit better. But then you can also go on the flip side of that, and that's what I was just talking about, is a healthier, better Lowry, an improved one more year of Tyler Herro, another year of Bam Adebayo taking that leap that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Is that a better version than the version that would include, I mean, you'd have to include Tyler Herro in a trade for Kyrie Irving, right? I mean,
why would you?
Seems pretty likely. You don't think that's what they would require in order to get him?
The Heat would pass. I mean, I don't think that the Heat would move off of Tyler Herro for Kyle Lowry at all, or for Kyrie Irving. No way. No, it would be Kyle Lowry and maybe a first-round pick. That would be the offer. It's better than what the Lakers are offering.
Maybe. I don't know. If that's the case, I guess that is clearly better because they're younger.
I mean, Frankie Sola from the New York. Am I gonna get this right? The New York Daily News. Yeah. Frankie Sola, famously of Around the Horn, I guess. He's reporting that the Nets have sort of warmed to the idea of Lowry for Irving, and then that obviously conflicts with Barry's reporting saying that the Heat would not include Lowry for Irving. Obviously, Frank in New York is getting the Nets side of it. Barry in Miami is getting Miami's side of it. But if Miami just simply moves off that stance, then it kind of seems like that's a path. That's a viable path. And if you're, all the reporting around the Nets and Joe Tsai, the owner there, basically just wants a hardworking team. He wants to reset the culture. Kyle Lowry is great for that. He is great for that. And maybe it helps you keep Kevin Durant. Durant likes Kyle Lowry. Yeah. I don't know. There's something to be said for that. Yeah, my sense from the Heat is that they would not include Tyler Herro in a Kyrie Irving trade. So, I would agree with that. With you, I'm with you. Why would you?
To answer Malcolm's question, could they go for Kyrie? Yes, but it seems a little unlikely, and I don't know that it necessarily makes this Heat team significantly better. So I will put a pin on that.
I'll just agree with you. I think if you just swap Lowry for Kyrie straight up, it makes this team better. Caveat being that Kyrie Irving is actually playing. That's the big caveat. Right. So, and that's the lack of reliability with Kyrie is why you would even question, and why Miami so far has been reluctant to trade Lowry for Kyrie.
To take Matt's question a step further, I think they would run it back-ish and look to acquire a power forward of some kind, because you need to fill in that gap that PJ Tucker has left in his decision to join the Philadelphia 76ers. But that leads us to our next question.
Well, maybe just wait to make that superstar trade closer to the deadline when all of these contracts are sort of unlocked and movable. But yeah.
Fair point. Our favorite yoga lady, Claudia, writes in, is Haywood Highsmith going to be starting as our 4? And then a follow-up question, is he good enough? At this point in time, like, we've heard some discussion about Highsmith's future with the team. I don't know if you want to care to elaborate on that. We've also heard that he could have been included in a potential trade for Mitchell. I'm not sure if he would have been included in the Durant trade as well. But let's get to that first of all. Do you think he has a place on this team in the future?
I do. I just think that the fact that his contract is non-guaranteed leaves it open to, if the right sort of veteran becomes available in free agency, Haywood's the obvious guy to get cut to go sign that player if you were going to
Right.
go that route. I just don't
Right.
know who that free agent is, and if that free agent was available, maybe that would have already happened, and Miami wouldn't have guaranteed $50,000 of his contract a few weeks ago. So I think Haywood Highsmith is on this roster opening day, barring like a major shakeup trade where he's somehow involved in that. Um, I would not sleep on him starting at the 4. I've said this.
Yeah.
Like the size that he has is better than Caleb Martin when you're talking about the options, and those are basically the options. He's much more experienced than Jovic, who, based on what we've seen in Summer League, is a long ways away from being an impactful NBA player, and that's fine. He was always a long-term project. That was the assumption when they drafted him. Yeah, I think Haywood, the Heat like him. He can hit the corner 3. He told us on this show months ago that he's looking at, PJ Tucker is the kind of guy that he wants to emulate, and that's the kind of guy that the Heat are looking to replace. So yeah, I wouldn't sleep on Haywood Highsmith potentially starting at power forward if that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think Miami's coaching staff certainly feels comfortable with that. I think they have enough faith in all the other players, whether it's Depot or Herro starting, if it's Lowry or anybody else at that point guard position, if it's Jimmy and Bam, like you go with that. Like, I mean, they rolled out a relative unknown a few years ago who's now getting paid a whole heck of a lot of money, and his name Duncan Robinson. And so they'll make that decision, and they're fine with it. They went with Max Strus midway through last season. Again, another undrafted player. They don't care. They don't care
Mhm.
what your path is to get to this point. They just want you to put in the work. And from everything we've heard, it seems like Highsmith is more than willing to do so. So, as the 4 spot, can he hold it down? To answer Claudia's question, that remains to be seen. From what we've
Yeah, who
seen, yeah,
knows?
I mean, there's the potential. He's got some chops offensively. He's got that ability to space the floor, like you mentioned. Can he fit into Miami's offense and keep it running as smoothly as it did? A big part of that, I think, would really be Lowry. Like that's just what Lowry does well, and so that's another, I think, reason to keep him. That wherever you're going to be able to put in at that 4, their job is going to get easier because you have Kyle Lowry on the floor, because you have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo as playmakers out there. You disagree?
No, I didn't realize that this whole episode was going to be you vouching for Kyle Lowry to stay with the Heat, but it's fine.
I just
like
I
it.
no, I don't
I
think
like
I
the
don't think it's
stance.
a turn. I did not think it's turned into that necessarily, but I also think people are like really dismissing like a 30-something-year-old Hall of Fame level player. Like
Yeah,
I think it's ridiculous. And then when you're looking at the other agents that are available, LaMarcus Aldridge at 837, Willie Cauley-Stein, Ed Davis. Sorry, I just don't see a lot of options out there. Already. Blake Griffin, like those are
yeah. No, there's
pretty
nobody.
players.
There's no free agent that's a
Carmelo
plug and play
Anthony.
starter at power forward. No. I think. Look, I know that Caleb Martin has probably got the inside track at starting at the other forward spot opposite Jimmy Butler, but this is going to be
That
something
cannot
that's
work.
one.
That
It's
can't
going to be
work.
something that's one or well, that's the best option that they have. Potentially, it could be, but this is going to be a job that's won in training camp, and if Haywood Highsmith steps up in training camp and wins that job, I think he's got a chance. I don't think that. I don't think anybody should assume anything about what the starting lineup is on opening night.
Oh, hey, can they bring back James Johnson? I didn't realize he was a free agent.
He is currently in Miami. He's doing the Miami Pro League thing, which was Wednesday night and Thursday night. Can they bring him back? Yeah, but I don't see that happening. So
Hmm. I don't think he's burned bridges here. I think that he has
no, but I think
he's got enough
yeah.
love.
But they would have to waive probably Haywood Highsmith, and I just think that they like Highsmith's upside a little bit more than what James Johnson can bring to the table. Unless
All
they
right.
really love James Johnson. But like James Johnson has not been a starting power forward in a long time. So I don't know that that's
Yeah.
either. I don't know that that's the option either. So
Well, they would want him to be able to be back in world class shape and do everything he did in the first place to earn that contract. But then, of course, once
yeah.
he earned that contract, he didn't quite live up to it for a number of reasons. So I wonder if there's some issues there that maybe they might not want to go down that path again. Of course, there's always Malik Beasley. I'm not Michael Beasley, not Malik Beasley. Michael
Also
Beasley.
at the Miami Pro League.
Michael Beasley?
He's in town.
Oh,
Call him
is he
up.
really?
Call him up, Andy. He's in town. He's actually
All
always in
right.
town. Pretty sure.
He's always everywhere. I think he just exists at all the planes of existence at the same time.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. Well, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you've got questions or comments, make sure to send those in via email or any other way. But for your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors around the NBA in just 30 minutes with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update. Again, in just 30 minutes or less. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.